Have any of you ever been trying to really focus on something important and then you got distracted? And then you got distracted again, and then another time after that? I know I have, and in an age overflowing with alerts and obligations, our attention is often constantly under siege by our devices, our work, our worries, and the world. And if you feel more distracted than ever, like you really are more distracted than you used to be, you're probably not imagining it, and you're not alone. One of the books that sparked this sermon is The Siren's Call: How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource, published earlier this year by the journalist Chris Hayes. On the one hand, the title of Chris's book reminds us that the battle for our attention stretches back millennia. Nearly 3,000 years ago in Homer's Odyssey, we see the story of the sirens, whose song was so sweet and alluring that it enchanted anyone who heard it, luring them off course, distracting them, if you will, and keeping them from ever returning home. On the other hand, there is something genuinely new in our world today. The way the siren call of the algorithm pulls and hooks our attention and keeps tugging at it, pulling us from one digital distraction to the next, sometimes without us noticing what's happened until like 2 hours later and we emerge from the YouTube rabbit hole or whatever. To use a more recent point of reference than Homer, newspapers. Early 20th century streetcar commuters often had their noses buried in newspapers, just as modern commuters are often bent over their phones. But the relationship many of us have with our phones is fundamentally different. A newspaper was portable, but it was also static and finite. A set number of pages that eventually came to an end. By contrast, our phones offer this endless scroll that follows us everywhere we go. Instead of us putting the newspaper down when we're done, our phones continually reach back for us, calling our attention again and again. Every major communication revolution, from the printing press to the radio to the television, has sparked moral anxiety. But this moment is different because never before has the scale and speed and personalization been so tightly fused together. And this may be only the beginning. As companies race to develop the next generation of augmented reality glasses, we are approaching a world in which digital overlays won't just be in our pockets, but literally in front of our eyes. Instead of choosing to look down or not at a screen, the screen may look back at us, layering notifications, ads, and algorithmic prompts onto the very spaces that we inhabit. And don't get me wrong, though, I'm no Luddite. I've been preaching from an iPad for years, and I have at least 3 other Apple devices within reach at this moment. I'm genuinely intrigued by the ways that augmented reality devices could make learning more immersive, could, for instance, allow surgeons to work with greater precision, and offer real-time captioning and visual assistance that expands accessibility and inclusion. They might allow distant family members to feel more present to one another, or even to help some people focus by reducing background clutter. They also hold remarkable promise for artists and designers and creators to imagine and build in entirely new ways. What I'm about to say, actually, I find very exciting and intriguing. Imagine having as many computer monitors as you want, as would be skillful and useful to you in that moment. Each one perfectly sized, perfectly placed, and visible only to you. Wherever you are, you could make this happen. No more squinting at overlapping windows or juggling screens. Augmented reality could create a fully customizable workspace wherever you are. And when the workday is done, that very same device could become the ideal entertainment setup. A movie screen that expands to the perfect size of your living room, a virtual TV that follows you from room to room without taking up an inch of wall space. Like so many tools humans have invented, new technologies can deepen connection, understanding, and creativity if we remain awake to how it shapes us and intentional about how we choose to use it. And this is why the question isn't simply whether the technology is good or bad, but who is controlling it and what is it optimized to do with our attention. So let me say a bit more about what attention actually is. I mean, if I say, pay attention, you know what I mean, right? You can feel that shift in yourself. If I'm like, really focus on this. I mean, can you feel yourself like tightening in? So I want to just say a little more about what attention is from a kind of a neurological perspective to become more aware of the promise and peril. And if any of you are ready to rage out right now about how our attention is being hijacked and abused by some of the worst actors in the world, stick with me. We're going to get to that too. So before we go further, just notice your breath right now. Breathe in and out. Just noticing, where is your attention right now? In real time, what is kind of going through your head? What are you focusing on or not? Just being aware of that. Dr. Zelena Montminy is a clinical psychologist and author of the recent book, Finding Focus, Own Your Attention in an Age of Distraction, when everyone else is trying to own and commodify your attention. She invites us to imagine a spectrum. On the one end is attention, a kind of broad, open awareness. In the middle is concentration, a narrowing of that attention, and on the far end is focus, intense concentration with a determined goal. The trouble is that even when we reach that far end and we're finally immersed in the flow of deep work, all it takes sometimes is one glance of our smartphone out the corner of our eye and one vibration, one notification, and suddenly we're distracted again. Part of the struggle is that our brains have evolved to have a strong novelty bias. New information activates the brain's reward pathways. It floods our brain with dopamine, not so much because the thing is pleasurable, but because dopamine is what motivates us to learn and explore. So when we encounter something unfamiliar and unknown, a new sight, sound, message, alert, our dopamine system lights up and signals us, pay attention, this might be important. That evolutionary advantage that's so helpful for learning becomes a real vulnerability when novelty never stops. Have you ever felt like this? So hey, sorry I missed your text, but I'm processing a nonstop 24/7 onslaught of information with a brain designed to eat berries in a cave. So there's a reason why all the major social media platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and the rest, have spent billions of dollars. Billions of dollars have been spent to keep you distracted, right? I mean, that's what we're up against. They have been engineered to exploit and monetize our brain's novelty bias. Social media design is explicitly modeled on the same psychological principles as slot machines, this endless vertical feed that delivers, and this is really important, variable rewards. Sometimes delightful, sometimes enraging, sometimes nothing at all. It is the unpredictability that keeps us coming back. If you've ever opened your favorite social media app, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, notice this over the next day or week and seen a cluster of new notifications and felt this little jolt in your body. I mean, I know exactly what that feels like. Anybody else? If not, pay attention to that. That is your brain's reward system firing. That is dopamine saying, look, something new might be here for you. The platforms know exactly what they're doing. This is not accidental. Something else many of us have noticed over the past few years, the major social media platforms keep getting worse. Anyone else notice that? It is absolutely the case. The journalist Cory Doctorow has even coined a term for this trend and recently published a book about it titled "Impoopification." That's not exactly the title, but I'll let you. Why everything suddenly got worse and what to do about it. Doctorow is showing this pattern. He does case studies of Facebook, Amazon, the iPhone, Twitter, Uber, Fitbit, and many others. And he argues that most all tech platforms follow a 4-step simple pattern. Stage 1, platforms really are good to us, the users. That's how they get you. In this early stage, we don't mind how addictive the design is because the product feels genuinely innovative. Genuinely value. It is genuinely innovative and valuable and adding value to your life. Stage 2, they begin to abuse us, their users, to make things better for their business customers. You know, they say if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So they get you in there and then they begin to sell you. This is where we begin to feel the platform degrading. More ads, more interruptions, more clutter, slowly eroding the value that we once found there. Stage 3, they abuse the business customers to get back all as much value as they can for themselves. So those ads, those business customers are buying, get them increasingly less value. At this point, everyone is unhappy except for the tech billionaires at the top of the pyramid. Stage 4, the platform becomes a giant pile of poop. Hence the term impoopification. And even then, it can still be hard to leave. That is the really sick and perverse thing. Because at that point, our habits, our relationships, whole parts of our lives are intertwined with the platform itself. It's this sunk cost. So comedian Bo Burnham is right that tech companies are trying to colonize every minute of your life. They're coming for every second of your attention. You know, Netflix says our main competitor is sleep, right? And they are doing so. They want to keep you watching. They want to keep you up, and they are doing so in deeply cynical ways, designing systems that deliberately exploit our human vulnerabilities as fully as possible to maximize their profits. As I mentioned in previous sermons, Neil Postman wrote a powerful and prophetic book about why all this matters. I couldn't recommend this book more highly. It's called Amusing Ourselves to Death. He argued that although it is difficult and important to guard against the dystopia that George Orwell warned us about in the novel 1984, we are less prepared to defend ourselves against the dystopia that Aldous Huxley warned us about in Brave New World. Orwell warns that we will be overcome by this externally opposed oppression of authoritarianism. And we really should be. That is a real concern. But in Huxley's vision, no big brother is required to deprive people of their autonomy, their maturity, their history. As he saw it, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. Artificial intelligence. I'll do another sermon on it in the fall. Again, it has both real pros and cons. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared is there would be no reason to ban a book because no one would want to read them anymore. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much information that we would be reduced to passivity. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. The civil libertarians and rationalists who were ever on the alert to oppose tyranny, and we're really grateful for that, they failed to take into account humanity's almost infinite appetite for distractions. In 1984, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, we are controlled by inflicting pleasure. What we pay attention to shapes who we become and what kind of world we create. So where do we go from here? If you are most drawn to solutions on the systemic level, I recommend the final part of Doctorow's book. He argues that the problems we face are not inevitable. They are the result of choices that can be changed. Power shapes behavior, and he highlights 4 areas where we can press our elected officials to ask, that we can add, as Polly said, we can add this to our holiday wish list that we send to our legislators. Number 1 is competition. Tech giants have grown so large and have swallowed up so many competitors that they now functionally are monopolies. Genuine competition has all but disappeared, so restoring strong antitrust enforcement would allow new, innovative, user-friendly platforms to emerge instead of being crushed or bought out before they have a chance to grow. For example, allowing Facebook to buy Instagram eliminated what could have been, for each of them, their strongest competitor. So instead of allowing them to compete in ways that keep them accountable to us, their users, because you have a real choice between the two, both platforms are now demonstrably worse, more extractive, more cluttered, more impoopified. Regulation. Basic guardrails are needed to protect us as users from predatory design, deceptive tactics, and the exploitation of our attention. Just as we regulate food and water or air, just as we used to regulate food and water and air for public safety, we can also regulate digital spaces to safeguard the public good and not merely for corporate profit. Number 3, interoperability. I know that's a mouthful. Platforms must be required to talk to one another so that we as users can leave without losing our data, our social connections, our ability to communicate. In other words, you shouldn't have to stay on Facebook or any platform because your friends or groups or memories are trapped there. Interoperability breaks that lock-in and restores genuine choice and competition. And finally, tech worker power. Strengthening the voices of workers who build and maintain these systems is essential. Tech workers often understand the harms of impoopification better than anyone. And when they have collective power through unions, through labor protections, and whistleblower safeguards, they can resist unethical practices from the inside. In Doctorow's words, quote, "It may be true that the law cannot force these corporate sociopaths to conceive of you as a human being, entitled to dignity and fair treatment, and not just an ambulatory wallet," which is how they see and treat most of us. "But it can make that executive fear you enough to treat you fairly and afford you dignity." In other words, justice cannot depend on the goodwill of powerful corporations led by some of the worst actors in the world. It depends on the power we, the people, build together to hold them accountable. Let me also be sure to name what can we do right now on the individual level to retrain our minds and to resist the siren call of the algorithm. One thing you can do, attend my meditation class. We're going to talk more about that in the middle hour, so just stay in the sanctuary or log back into the Zoom room. If the sermon leaves you curious to learn more, Dr. Montanemi's book also includes, if you look way down at the bottom, this is kind of an eye test, includes a 21-day focus plan. So, this book gets really specific if that might be of use to you. For now, I'm going to offer just 4 practices that you can experiment with, taking anything that feels helpful to you in this season of your life and setting the rest aside. Number 1, try getting your news old school. A physical newspaper gives you a truer, calmer picture of the world than the version of that same paper that you encounter online. In print, stories like international elections or economic reporting, they're given real space and thoughtful placement. Online, those stories often disappear while the platform promotes whatever provokes the most outrage, the most clicks. Reading in print or digitally, but in a curated, non-algorithmic format, put your attention back in the hands of thoughtful human editors rather than the casino-like algorithm that rewards anger and distraction. Another option is to find a trusted news podcast, such as Democracy Now! Any Democracy Now! Listeners out there? That gives you a thoughtful, curated hour of reporting, just an hour. That will keep you informed, and not just listening hour after hour to the same thing, like recapitulated in slightly different ways. rather than pulling you into an endless scroll. High-quality alternatives. If you find yourself reflexively opening social media anytime there's a slight bit of boredom or you're in a line, try replacing that habit with something genuinely nourishing. Listening to a great audiobook, to a great podcast, reading an ebook, or using an app like Duolingo. That's the best thing I've found, is using something like Duolingo that uses the same psychological hooks as social media, but channels them to a constructive goal, like learning a new language. Time blocking. Set aside a defined period, whether a short 25-minute block or 90 minutes or longer, for focused, uninterrupted work with no social media, potentially putting your phone like on the other side of not just the room, but like in many rooms away from you as possible. Try scheduling this time when your energy and attention are at their best, often in the morning, so you can give your clearest hours to your most meaningful and impactful work. Over time, this practice will strengthen your focus muscle, training your brain to stay with one task longer and with greater ease. And finally, emergency interventions. When you're trying to focus and you can just feel that algorithm pulling at your attention, pause and try a simple reset. Take a few deep, mindful, compassionate breaths. Just breathing out, breathe in the annoyance and breathe out the algorithm, right? and return to focus. Or ask yourself, just take a little break and ask yourself, what 1 or 2 yoga poses does my body need right now? And then kind of return to focus. Or go on outside for a short walk, just kind of around the building, around the house, just a short walk outside. You might even allow yourself a moment of clear-eyed anger, like shake your fist at, you're getting me. And that the little clear-eyed anger can sometimes give you what you need to return to focus. Not to spiral, to remember that this pull is designed, not inevitable. These small, embodied micro-interventions can interrupt the distraction loop and gently bring you back to focus. Our attention really is intentionally under siege. The siren call of the algorithm is real, but so is our human capacity to choose differently. I do not foresee a return anytime to a world without digital temptations, but we can return to ourselves. We can reclaim the ability to notice what truly matters, to set boundaries that honor our well-being, and to cultivate the kind of deep, spacious attention that reconnects us to wonder at the world, this wonderful world. To wisdom, to one another. May we as individuals and as a community learn to listen for the quieter call, the one that leads us not toward distraction, but toward depth and presence and a more intentional life.